Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them now.
Moving my files into the trunk.
Don't get smart. You're loitering on government property. ID now.
Officer, look at the badge on that box. I'm District Attorney Jenkins.
Yeah, right. And I'm the mayor. Turn around. You're under arrest.
Touch those cuffs. You're ending your career.
The body camera recording captured everything, preserving every frame of a career-ending mistake in high-definition digital video. The shaky lens, the harsh afternoon sun, and the aggressive posturing, it was all there, locked into the server before Officer Mark Miller could even think about pressing delete. But what the camera couldn't capture was the sheer magnitude of the ignorance at play. As Officer Miller barked orders and unholstered his handcuffs, he had absolutely no idea who he was talking to. He saw a woman in a parking lot. He saw boxes. He saw an opportunity to exert dominance. He didn't see 15 years of flawless prosecutorial service. He didn't see the woman who had just secured a 98% conviction rate in the previous quarter. He didn't see the literal boss of the entire district's justice system. District Attorney Sarah Jenkins remained composed, her voice steady even as steel cuffs bit into her wrists, but inside, she was already calculating the legal devastation she was about to rain down on the department. Miller thought he was making a routine arrest for loitering. In reality, he was writing a check for $6.4 million that the taxpayers would have to cash and signing the termination letter for his own career. Before we dive deeper into this catastrophic failure of police procedure, I need you to do something right now. Go to the comments section and answer this. Do you think police officers should be required to call a supervisor before arresting anyone on government property? Type yes or no right now. I want to see where you stand on this. Also, if you believe in holding power accountable, smash that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the breakdown of the lawsuit coming up later in this video. Sarah Jenkins was not a woman who expected special treatment, despite having earned every right to demand it. At 42 years old, she had spent nearly half her life in the trenches of the American legal system. She wasn't a political appointee who sat behind a mahogany desk signing papers. She was a grinder. She had started as a junior clerk, working 80-hour weeks, and clawed her way up to becoming the first black female district attorney in the county's history. Her resume was a fortress of competence, dual degrees from Yale Law, a lead prosecutor on 3 high-profile racketeering cases that dismantled a local organized crime syndicate, and a reputation for being tough but meticulously fair. Colleagues described Jenkins as human granite. She didn't crack under pressure. In the courtroom, she was known for a piercing silence, a way of looking at a defense attorney or a lying witness that made them stumble over their own words without her saying a thing. She had put away violent offenders, corrupt politicians, and even dirty cops. That was the irony that would later haunt the department. Jenkins was actually pro-police. She worked side by side with detectives daily, signing warrants and prepping them for testimony. She respected the badge, arguably more than the man who was about to arrest her. But on that specific Saturday afternoon, stripped of her courtroom armor, she was just a civilian in a pantsuit. She wasn't looking for a fight. She had come to the annex building on her day off to move old case files to her car. Archival work she insisted on doing herself because she didn't trust the interns with sensitive data. She was tired. She was thinking about a motion she needed to file on Monday. She was completely ordinary. There was no security detail, no entourage, just a woman and a stack of cardboard boxes. It was the kind of mundane, quiet moment that usually passes without history taking note. But in this case, it was the calm before a $6 million storm. The incident occurred at the North County Municipal Annex, a sprawling, brutalist concrete structure that housed overflow administrative offices and court archives. It was 4:40 p.m. on a Saturday. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long, sharp shadows across the asphalt, creating that deceptive magic hour lighting that filmmakers love and police cameras struggle with. The parking lot was largely deserted, save for Jenkins' silver sedan and a few city maintenance trucks parked in the far corner. The air was still, dry, and silent. Jenkins was on her third trip from the building to her car. She was carrying a heavy banker's box labeled RICO, 2023 evidence. She set it down on the pavement to open her trunk, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. She was dressed impeccably in a navy-tailored suit, but the labor of moving boxes had slightly disheveled her appearance. Enter Officer Mark Miller, 28 years old, 3 years on the force. Miller was known in the precinct, but not for the reasons a cop wants to be known. His personnel file was thick with attitude complaints, minor infractions where citizens felt he was rude, dismissive, or overly aggressive, though none had stuck as formal discipline. He considered himself a proactive officer, the kind who went looking for trouble rather than waiting for the radio to crackle. He was patrolling the lot in his cruiser when he spotted Jenkins. Music swell, tense ambient drone to a seasoned observer. Jenkins looked like exactly what she was, a professional working overtime. But Miller's internal bias filtered the image differently. He didn't see a district attorney. He saw a black woman in an empty lot, loading boxes into a car on a weekend. His mind jumped to theft. He assumed she was a disgruntled employee looting office supplies, or perhaps someone stealing documents. He didn't run her license plate. He didn't call dispatch to ask if there were authorized personnel in the building. He simply made a snap judgment that would destroy his life. He parked his cruiser diagonally, blocking her exit, a tactical intimidation move. He exited the vehicle, hand resting on his utility belt, not yet unholstering his weapon, but signaling readiness. He adjusted his sunglasses, took a breath, and decided to initiate a confrontation that violated 3 different departmental policies before he even opened his mouth. Jenkins turned, startled by the sudden arrival, but her expression didn't show fear. It showed annoyance. And that annoyance, to Officer Miller, looked like resistance. Authority, step away from the vehicle, hands where I can see them now. The air in the parking lot shifted instantly from quiet labor to a volatile crime scene. Jenkins froze, her hand resting on the open trunk of her sedan. She didn't raise her hands in the surrender pose Miller wanted. Instead, she turned her body fully toward him, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Victim, excuse me? I'm just moving my files into the trunk." Miller closed the distance rapidly. In his mind, her failure to immediately comply with a physical command was a threat indicator. He didn't hear a reasonable explanation. He heard defiance. He was already writing the narrative of a non-compliant suspect in his head. "Authority, don't get smart. You're loitering on government property. ID now." Jenkins paused. This was the critical moment where a veteran officer might have noticed her tone, educated, precise, commanding, but Miller was too focused on control. Jenkins knew the law better than Miller ever would. She knew that under Arizona v. Johnson, an officer needs reasonable suspicion of criminal activity to demand identification in this specific context. She wasn't driving, she was standing. "Victim, officer, look at the badge on that box. I'm District Attorney Jenkins." She pointed calmly to the white banker's box at her feet. On the side, clearly printed, was the official seal of the District Attorney's office and her name, Sarah Jenkins, Esquire. It was right there. A cursory glance would have ended the encounter, but Miller didn't look down. He kept his eyes locked on hers, his ego now fully engaged. He felt challenged. "Authority, yeah, right. And I'm the mayor. Turn around, you're under arrest." Music intensifies. Miller reached for his radio, keying the mic to signal he had a 10 to 15, a prisoner in custody. He was committing to the mistake. Jenkins' face hardened. The confusion evaporated, replaced by the cold steel gaze used to break down homicide suspects. She shifted her stance, not to fight, but to project absolute authority. "Victim, if you touch those cuffs, you're ending your career, Miller." It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. But to Miller, it sounded like intimidation. He lunged forward, grabbing her left wrist and twisting it behind her back with excessive force. The physical contact was the point of no return. A passerby, a young man walking his dog across the street, stopped and pulled out his phone. The camera was rolling from 2 angles now, Miller's Bodycam and the civilian's smartphone. Authority resisting arrest? That's another charge. "Stop talking and turn around." Miller was shouting now, his voice cracking slightly with adrenaline. He was trying to perform for an invisible audience, trying to prove he was in control. He shoved Jenkins against the quarter panel of her own car. The metal groaned under the impact. "Victim, I'm your boss, and this lawsuit is going to cost the city millions." Miller ignored the words. He was in tunnel vision mode. He ratcheted the handcuffs tight, too tight. He didn't double lock them, a procedural error that causes nerve damage if the detainee moves. "Authority, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." "Victim, oh, I know my rights, officer. Better than you do. Is your body cam on?" "Authority, it's recording everything, lady." "Victim, good. That's Exhibit A." Miller spun her around and marched her toward his cruiser. He was rough, pushing her head down as he shoved her into the cramped back seat. He slammed the door with a sense of finality. In his mind, he had just cleaned up the streets. He had taken down a loiterer who gave him lip. He sat in the driver's seat, adrenaline pumping, and radio dispatch. "Authority, dispatch, Unit 4 Alpha, 1 female in custody. Loitering, resisting, failure to ID, transporting to Central now. Dispatch, copy 4 Alpha, subject name, authority, refused to give it, claims she's the DA." There was a long pause on the radio, a silence that lasted 3, 4, 5 seconds. "Dispatch, Unit 4 Alpha, say again, did she say she is Jenkins?" "Authority, yeah, some nut job." "Dispatch 4 Alpha, stand by. Supervisor is en route. Do not leave the scene." Miller frowned at the radio. "Stand by?" He was already in gear. He ignored the subtle warning in the dispatcher's voice. He pulled out of the lot, driving toward the precinct, with the district attorney sitting in his back seat, memorizing his badge number and calculating the punitive damages. Have you ever been in a situation where someone with a little bit of power refused to listen to reason? Let me know in the comments below. The ride to the station was only 12 minutes, but for Sarah Jenkins, it was an eternity of calculated silence. The back of a patrol car is designed to be dehumanizing. Hard plastic seats that force the body into an unnatural angle, the smell of stale sweat and industrial cleaner, the cage separating you from the driver. Jenkins sat perfectly still. She didn't scream, she didn't kick the door, and she didn't beg. She simply observed. She noted that Miller was driving 5 miles over the speed limit without lights or sirens. She noted he was texting on his personal phone while the vehicle was in motion. She was building her case. When they arrived at the Central Precinct Sally Port, the garage door rumbled open, and Miller pulled in. He yanked Jenkins out of the car, parading her past 2 other officers who were booking a drunk driver. "Got a live one," Miller joked to his colleagues. "Thinks she runs the place." He brought her to the booking desk. The sergeant on duty, Sergeant Reynolds, was a 20-year veteran. He looked up from his computer, his eyes scanning the suspect. He saw the suit. He saw the face. He saw the handcuffs. All the color drained from Reynolds' face instantly. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "Miller," Reynolds whispered, his voice trembling. "What did you do?" "Loitering. Resisting," Miller said, puffing his chest out. "Refused ID. Take the cuffs off," Reynolds barked. "Right now. Take them off." "Sarge, that I's the district attorney, you moron!" Reynolds screamed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. The silence that followed was absolute. Miller froze. The key in his hand shook as he looked from his sergeant back to Jenkins. For the first time, he actually looked at her, really looked at her, and the recognition hit him like a physical blow. He had seen her face on campaign posters. He had seen her on the news. Miller fumbled with the cuffs. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get the key into the slot. Another officer had to step in and do it. As soon as her hands were free, Jenkins rubbed her wrists. She didn't yell. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed her hair, and looked at Sergeant Reynolds. "I want the watch commander down here," she said, her voice ice cold. "And I want my phone." Within minutes, the station was in chaos. The captain was called in from a family dinner. The chief of police was on the line. Jenkins stood in the middle of the booking room, using her cell phone to take photos of the red marks on her wrists. She refused the offer of a chair in the captain's office. She wanted to stand right there, in the booking area, so every officer could see exactly what was happening. Jenkins walked out of the precinct 45 minutes later, not as a released suspect, but as a plaintiff. She didn't go home to cry. She went straight to her office, the same office she had been trying to move files for, and drafted a preservation letter. This is a legal document demanding that all evidence, including body cam footage, security tapes, and radio logs, be secured immediately. She knew how these things worked. She knew how evidence notoriously corrupted or went missing when officers were in the crosshairs. By Monday morning, the lawsuit was filed. It wasn't a standard complaint. It was a 40-page indictment of the department's culture. Jenkins sued for unlawful arrest, excessive force, violation of her Fourth Amendment rights, and defamation. The damages sought, $6, $4 million. The number wasn't random. It was calculated based on potential lost earnings, emotional distress, and punitive damages designed to hurt the city's budget enough to force change. The video leak happened on Tuesday. The bystander footage hit Twitter first, garnering 2 million views in 6 hours. Then, compelled by public pressure and the high profile of the victim, the department released the body cam footage. The contrast was damning. The internet watched a calm, well-dressed black woman identify herself as the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the district, only to be mocked and manhandled by a junior officer. The internal affairs investigation was swift, mostly because Jenkins refused to let them drag it out. She recused herself from the criminal side of the case to avoid a conflict of interest, handing it over to the state attorney general. But the internal probe dug up dirt that went beyond just that Saturday. Data analysis revealed that Officer Miller stopped black drivers at a rate 4 times higher than white drivers. It showed a pattern of contempt of cop arrests, cases where the only crime was hurting the officer's feelings. Officer Mark Miller was terminated 18 days after the incident. The termination letter cited gross misconduct, failure to follow arrest procedures, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. He attempted to appeal through the police union, claiming he made an honest mistake in good faith. The arbitration board laughed him out of the room. The body cam footage where he said, "Yeah, right, and I'm the mayor," was played on a loop during the hearing. It proved malice. It proved arrogance. It proved he didn't care about the truth. But the consequences didn't stop with Miller. The Department of Justice launched a civil rights investigation into the entire precinct. The investigation, triggered by Jenkins' lawsuit, found a pattern and practice of unconstitutional stops. The city was forced into a consent decree, a federal court order mandating specific reforms, including mandatory de-escalation training and a new policy requiring supervisor approval for certain types of arrests. The city settled Jenkins' lawsuit for the full $6, $4 million. They didn't even try to take it to trial. They knew a jury would have awarded her double that amount. In a final act of leadership, Jenkins didn't keep the money for a new house or a luxury car. She donated the majority of the settlement to establish a legal defense fund for indigent defendants, people who didn't have her badge or her knowledge to protect them. As for Mark Miller, he is permanently decertified. He can never hold a job in law enforcement again in the state. The last reports indicate he was working security for a logistics warehouse, ironically watching boxes, but with zero authority to arrest anyone. This story matters because it strips away the usual excuses. We often hear that if you just comply, if you dress respectfully, if you have a good job, you'll be safe. Sarah Jenkins did all of that. She was the literal embodiment of the law. She had the suit, the credentials, the calm demeanor, and the power. And it still wasn't enough to protect her from a biased officer with a badge and an ego. If this can happen to the district attorney, imagine what happens to a 19-year-old kid in a hoodie who doesn't know Arizona v. Johnson or Terry v. Ohio. Imagine the outcome if there hadn't been a body cam, or if Jenkins hadn't been who she was. That is the terrifying reality this case exposed. Justice was served here, yes, but only because the victim happened to be the boss. We need to talk about this. The system worked for Sarah Jenkins eventually, but it failed her in that parking lot. I want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of this video? The officer's arrogance or the sergeant's reaction? Do you think $6, $4 million was enough, or should it have been more? Share this video with someone who thinks compliance is always the answer. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the cases they don't want you to see. I'll see you in the next one.